Welcome to the December 12th, 1912 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission.
2012.
2012, what did I say?
1912.
1912?
You're dating yourself.
Well, let's move back to the future. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jack Reisenberg, Chairman of the Commission. This time I'd like to introduce the other members of the Commission. To my far right, Commissioner Culbertson, next to him, Commissioner Lay, and to my left, Commissioner Ziccarelli. From the city staff this evening is Ms. Zerniak is with us, and also Megan Neuman. Welcome. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the November 14th, 2012 Plan Commission meeting. Are there any corrections or requests for clarification? Hearing none, or with no corrections, the motion is passed. The next item before the Commission this evening is a presentation and public hearing regarding the Bicycle Master Plan Working Draft. This is the second in a series of 3 anticipated meetings to review, hear public comment, and consider this plan. Commission input and direction is requested, will be requested prior to finalization of the plan. And Ms. Neuman is going to make the presentation to us this evening? Yes?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Megan Neuman, as the Chairman indicated. I'm a planner with the City of Lake Forest. I'm very excited to present to you the working draft of the Bicycle Master Plan. Knowing that there are some typos in the document and some areas that are still in outline form, we really wanted to bring this forward to keep you informed of the process, and given the length of the document, to give you time to digest the information before final action is requested of you later in January of next year. I am joined this evening by other members of the project team, Bob Ells and Chuck Myers from city staff. I also see some representatives from Active Transportation and Lake Bluff, and cyclists in the community, so I just want to acknowledge that they are here to support the plan and, excuse me, and thank them for their input in the plan so far. Commissioners, I want you to keep in mind as you read the plan documents and as you listen to my presentation this evening that this master plan is really a high-level planning document. It's a way to support future improvements for bicycling in the community and really generate awareness of bicycling and support for bicycling in Lake Forest. With that, I'd like to start with a quick overview of the public process to date. I'm sorry, the font on that is very small. But I wanted to emphasize that this plan is a product of several community workshops and information sessions that have been held over the past year. As the plan is finalized, we will continue to work with the resident focus group and incorporate the input from you and other staff members to bring forward a final draft for your review. I was before the Plan Commission, when was it, back in October, and gave an overview of the public input the project team has received so far through the process, and give you an overview of the general concepts that form the foundation for the master plan. In particular, I just wanted to point out that residents identified local destinations, areas of regional connections, concerned areas in the community, as well as identified dream routes of where they wanted to bike in Lake Forest. I pulled this graphic out of the master plan that you were provided last week because I really think it summarizes an interesting study that was completed out in Portland. And other communities have found this graph helpful and an accurate portrayal when thinking about the purpose of a bicycle master plan. The study broke a typical U.S. city into 4 categories relating to bicycling and found that pretty much across the board, there's 30% of people who have no interest in bicycling and they're not going to bike regardless of what you do in a community. And that's fine. A small percentage of people, the strong and fearless group, they're really happy with smooth pavement and an open road. You know, they don't really need a lot of encouragement through bicycle facilities. The next group is the 9% that make up the confident and enthusiastic group. This group falls into members of bicycle clubs, people who go on group rides, and utilize routes that are specifically geared towards bicycles with bike lanes and markings. Finally, the last group, the 60% group of residents who are interested and concerned, really make up the target group for the master plan. This group of people need a little bit more encouragement, some more guidance to feel comfortable biking on the streets. And this master plan establishes a framework to improve the compatibility of bikes on the roads for several key routes identified through the public process. Just a quick refresher from the last time I was here, some key observations from the community regarding bicycling. First, Lake Forest streets are primarily residential in character. They have low traffic counts and low posted speeds, making a majority of the existing roadways suitable for most cyclists without much intervention. I wanted to point that out because this is a great asset when you think about the desire for a well-connected bicycle network from your driveway to a specific destination. There are, however, some areas where people do not feel safe riding, given the current conditions, such as riding through the parking lot down by the East Lake Forest train station, Route 60, other busy roads, Waukegan, crossing busy intersections. And improving those key areas and routes will really help connect Lake Forest even more. Next is the identified need for consistent and well-placed signs and markings to really help people get around on bike and clarify some of the rules of the road to encourage motorists and cyclists to share the road while they're out driving or cycling. Just a quick summary of the existing conditions. I did go over this last time. Lake Forest has several well-used, well-maintained bike trails in the community. They run north-south, the Robert McClory bike path, the Skokie Valley bike path, and then a trail through the Middle Fork Savannah as well. Through this public process, there were some issues identified, inconsistent signage to identify where those routes are located, a lack of an east-west connection, and then overall maintenance needs to make the roadways suitable for cycling. All of the observations and input led to the establishment of 5 main goals for the plan. These include awareness, to bring attention to bikes throughout the community, connectivity, to create a bicycle network for Lake Forest, in particular an east-west connection, safety, to promote safe connections and street crossings in the community, health and wellness, to promote active lifestyles within Lake Forest, and finally the environment, to encourage completion of short trip by bike instead of car to reduce congestion and pollution in the community. To summarize the document that you received last week, the Bicycle Master Plan is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is an overview of the purpose and public process, which we've already reviewed. Section 2 lays out the network and tools to improve bicycle connectivity on the roadways. And Section 3, which is still in very rough draft form, outlines bicycle-friendly concepts and the idea of the 5 E's of bicycle planning that we discussed last time. The idea of including engineering, education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation concepts in the master plan. In an effort to identify a hierarchy, the plan calls out core routes that are essential to the bicycle network and key branch connections that enhance the connectivity in the community. There are also several intersections highlighted on the plan that could really benefit from additional study to better facilitate bicycle crossing. And finally, opportunity areas are called out that may not have an identified solution in the plan, but are identified so that if a project is proposed in that area, bike connections are considered. Core routes. We looked at a lot of streets in Lake Forest and realized that not every street needed to be called out in the plan. Hence the idea of the core routes and the branch connections that we're presenting in the plan this evening. We used the survey data we collected to inform some of the selected routes identified for enhanced bicycle treatment. For example, Deer Path was a desired connection. Everyone wants to bike on Deer Path, but it was also identified as hazardous, as dangerous, as too busy, too congested. So one solution that we proposed in the Bicycle Master Plan is a core route that bypasses that small section of Deer Path and travels along on Wensia and Ahwahnee instead. to make up that east-west connection. The branch connections add connectivity to the network and help facilitate connections to key destination, such as Conway Office Park along Field Drive or the beach along East Deer Path. The image up on the screen is a section through Wesley Road, East Wesley Road, showing how bicycle improvements can be added to certain routes within Lake Forest without much change to the character or size of the road pavement. In this case, we're showing what's called a road diet, where you reduce the width of the travel lanes for cars, still maintaining the standard for Lake Forest, but allowing for a designated area for bicyclists to go. Intersections are always challenging. They are called out in the plan for improvement as they are brought forward for capital improvement. Primarily intersections along Highway 41 and Waukegan were identified as difficult to cross on bike. Tools like the bike box shown on the screen clearly designate an area for bicycles, and colored pavement that improve guidance across wide intersection could be considered to improve connectivity and conditions at intersections. We also heard a lot about the timing of lights and the desire to make intersections more bike-friendly. And the good thing about focusing on intersections in the plan is that providing some interventions to improve the conditions for cyclists has been shown to improve predictability of bicyclists, as well as reduce the chance that cyclists will blow through a light because there are facilities in place that allow the light to change to allow them to go through safely. Connection opportunities are another aspect of the master plan. The Route 60 corridor is a good example of an opportunity that's identified as both a core route as well as a connection opportunity to enhance the route and help overcome some barriers that exist in this area, such as the railroad crossing. The opportunity areas called out in the plan will take additional planning, additional design work, but they're called out to start the conversation if a future project is proposed. The Central Business District is also called out in the plan as a study area, recognizing that there are a couple of grant applications in the works with the city to improve the connectivity along the Robert McClory bike path and also support commuter bike parking at this train station. The hope is that providing facilities for bikes in this area will increase, again, the predictability of cyclists and add to the vibrancy of the Central Business District. Bicycle parking has been included in the plan. And as this section becomes more fully developed, we will establish standards for both the location and the appearance of bicycle parking. This is an example by the Jewel here in Lake Forest. Note that there is a bike rack located in this location. However, this cyclist chose to lock the bike against a tree. The lesson learned here is that poorly placed bike racks will not be used, and that bikes parked haphazardly around town really add to the streetscape clutter that traditionally Lake Forest has tried to keep to a minimum, and they also could be hazards to pedestrians in the area. Another creative idea that came out through the public process for this plan was the idea of installing temporary bike corrals at key locations during warmer months. You can see here outside of Caribou, there are, I think, 2 bikes parked in the doorway, blocking the door to the apartments above. The idea would be, maybe there's an opportunity to take over one of the parking spaces here with some temporary racks during warmer months, remove them in the cooler months, and promote bicycling to those types of locations. Signage is a real low-impact tool that helps to confirm that someone is on a designated bike route, helps to serve directional needs for cyclists in the community. It's also useful to alert motorists that bicycles may be present on this route and there is a need to share the road. Throughout the process, we've heard that there are some confusing signs in Lake Forest. This master plan is an opportunity to identify those areas of confusion and clean them up. One that comes to mind is the signs in the Central Business District that just say walk bikes. I've had a lot of people ask me, are you not allowed to bike in the central business district? Signs like the one on the right here help to clarify the concept that you walk your bike on the sidewalk, ride your bike on the street, creating a pedestrian character for the downtown, but still allowing bicyclists to get around. The last tool that I want to highlight this evening is the idea of a sharrow. Sharrows are pavement markers that are typically installed on roads that are not wide enough to support a full 5-foot bike lane, and help to designate an area for a cyclist, and again, alert motorists that they may have to shift out of the lane to pass a bicyclist. The last section of the bicycle master plan describes the bicycle-friendly concepts and the idea that a process should be established to ensure that future capital improvement projects consider bikes when they are in the planning stages consider bikes along the core and branch routes. This section also highlights action steps to encourage community bike rides or other ways to get people excited about bicycling in the community, to support educational opportunities in the community and school, and also evaluate the success of the plan over time. Given that this is associated with a update to the comprehensive plan, that's consistent with comprehensive plan updates as well. So next steps, we're nearing the end of this process. We will continue to refine the plan based on your input this evening, working with the resident focus group to hear their comments, and other residents who may be at home watching this presentation this evening. We're always listening and welcome your input. Our hope is to bring a draft plan back to you early next year. So I look forward to your comments. Again, keep in mind that this is a guiding document. The master plan is not an implementation plan. It's a way to generate awareness, support bicycling in the community. I did provide you with some discussion questions in your packets that you received to really help just give you a lens in which to view the master plan and provide some direction to us this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Megan. Questions or comments from commissioners? Yes? Mr. Culbertson?
Megan, do I understand that in consideration of this master plan that we are not getting down to particulars with respect to how we might enhance some of these connection routes by way of, say, a central median, a side path, an overpass, whatever? It's just to identify locations and that may need addressing.
The first level is, yes, to identify which routes are important to provide improvements on. There will be a section where we identify some recommended facilities for each route, given our preliminary look at the road width and the speeds to try to achieve a higher compatibility for bicycles. I think that the more technical review will happen after the plan is approved to verify that those are all feasible and moving forward. But we will do our best to identify practical and feasible solutions for the various routes.
Thank you. That's all I have right now, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lloyd?
Yes. The pie chart included in the purpose section is basically a typical U.S. city. Megan, do you have any further data on Lake Forest that you may have gotten through the citizen advisory group or?
Sure. We did survey the residents early in the process. We didn't ask those specific questions, so I don't have a direct comparison to that chart.
Okay.
But I would say in general, based on the feedback that I've received, based on phone calls and talking to people at public hearings, that it's a pretty good representation
Okay.
For the plan. And it really helped us say, okay, the people that we want to focus this plan on are those that may not bike now because they're afraid and they need a little more encouragement in order to get on their bike and do their shopping errands or go visit a friend.
Okay. Second question is, you mentioned the East Lake Forest train station parking lots as safety issues there. I would really amplify. I mean, my observations is that the motorists don't even know that's a bike path. And number two, that the bicyclists are going through there at excessive rates of speed. As a result of that, are you seeing lots of car-bike collisions in those lots?
The crash data that we reviewed, I believe maybe 1 out of the 5 that were reported in Lake Forest were in that area.
Okay.
But it has been identified as a hazard. You know, people are hesitant to go through there. Motorists, you know, don't see the bikes that come out in the middle of the intersection. There's not a lot of good signage or markings to identify where bicycles should go. There is a conceptual plan that we're working through with a grant application that really continues a side path, a separated bike path through that area. The McClory bike path is an off-road trail north of those parking lots as well as south. So it would make sense to continue that secure bike area through the central business district.
Okay. And last question, you mentioned in the report experienced bicyclist teams. Did you get any input from those groups?
We certainly did.
Okay.
There are members of bike groups as part of our focus group. People have come to meetings. I think it's good to have people who are energetic and excited about bicycling contribute to the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ziccarelli?
Megan, as the core routes get developed, you just mentioned that that's kind of the next level of technical discussion, and there would be physical changes, most likely to the roadways and to so forth. In areas where that's difficult or expensive, has there been any consideration to maybe changing the rules, such as single line bike travel as opposed to, you know, side by side, just as an alternative to make the plan work if the physical part of it just gets too costly, too expensive, or can't be done?
The expense part of the bicycle master plan, we're hoping would be addressed through grant funding. So, you know, if, when a project is identified, it will go through staff review, and if a route is identified as part of the bicycle master plan scheduled for improvement, we would look at the costs and the feasibility and the availability of funding before moving forward with a capital improvement process. You know, they all go hand in hand. Your question about whether there's I'm not sure I understood the question exactly about a single lane.
Well, say you widen a road, and it involves moving the curb, moving the gutter, potentially moving storm sewers, making adjustments. Could be costly. If the road width basically had to stay the same, could the adjustment be made with the riders to ride single file in those core areas, as opposed to a costly physical change to the roadway?
Okay. The master plan is, the goal is to identify lower impact facilities, so ones that wouldn't require necessarily extreme widening of roadways, but working within the existing roadway that's there with some striping or pavement markers. The rules of the road do indicate that cyclists should move over and be single file when traffic is present, no more than 2 across. So I think that's an education component that could be further developed in the plan to clarify the proper placement on a road.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see, as part of the master plan, it talks about, you know, the biking movement and the environment and the physical changes and so forth. For many years, I've lived in the area of Everett, Old Elm, and know that that gets heavily used. And I oftentimes see conflicts, I guess is the best way to put it, by motorists that can't get around, need to go in the other lane, which is fine, except when they're so encumbered that they have to sit for a long time and get impatient behind a pack of bicyclists that refuse to yield. And I'm thinking that a little bit of enforcement, maybe, as part of the overall plan might be a good idea as well. And
Definitely.
I was just thinking of behavior, both motorists and bicyclists might be a good solution.
Correct. I think enforcement and education for all parties is important.
Thank you.
Okay. Megan, could you just reiterate again the remaining part of the process and the timeline?
The timeline will be, I think, up to the commission. I know the January meeting date might shift around, but our goal is to bring this forward to you at the end of January.
Oh, okay. And what do you have to do to, before you do that?
Our hope is to, if there's any input that we're receiving from you this evening, to incorporate that into the final draft, to clean up some of the areas that are just outlined currently and need a little bit more beefing up and explanation, and really make sure we're presenting you with a cohesive final draft of the document.
Okay, good. I don't know if you got a lot of commentary other than keep up the good work.
I got some good notes.
Yeah, okay, good, good. Thank you, Megan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Kathy, did you have anything else to?
Just one comment.
Sure.
Commissioner Culbertson, you started out by asking the question, I think it had something to do with whether the commission should share brilliant ideas if you have them at this point, and I think whether they even move into that more, technical range. I think if there are thoughts or ideas, it's perfectly fine to throw those out there, and Ms. Neuman can decide whether those are appropriate to include. But I think the more information, if there's something, as you just said, Commissioner Ziccarelli, if there's something that crosses your mind, or even if in the next month as you're driving around, don't hesitate to either raise it now or shoot an email to Ms. Neuman.
Right, that's very much accurate. I welcome all of your comments, and really we're still gathering input every day, so the more the better.
Thank you, Megan.
On that note, Mr.
Oops,
Chairman, may I
absolutely,
may I ask
sure,
a question?
Sure, sure.
Given that entree. Well, I guess specifically, well, I'll ask a general question first. Where would the funding for this sort of thing, for these improvements, come from? Would they come from the city? Would they come in conjunction with grants from other government agencies, or?
The hope would be to receive grant funding for projects that are above and beyond the typical budget for capital improvements. So we can certainly work to include a section in the plan that calls out some specific funding agencies that we would look to first to generate funds for the implementation.
Would becoming a, quote, bicycle-friendly community by way of the American League of Bicyclists, does that have any impact on your ability to garner funding from other agencies?
I definitely believe that the more positive recognition that the city receives, the better when it comes to receiving grant funding. I also want to point out that we have collaborated efforts with the Village of Lake Bluff. We are trying to look at this beyond the limits of just Lake Forest and look to making regional connections, making sure that things that we do within our jurisdiction doesn't prohibit another community from making a connection, a valid connection.
And then finally, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I noticed in the presentation of the master plan, or the draft, that there were things like a side path mentioned, or to run alongside, not on the road surface of a busy street, but a separate side path along the parkway, so that, or a central median strip down the center of a busy thoroughfare. I don't recall seeing anything about an overpass, perhaps, over 41 or something like that, in order to achieve connectivity east to west. Is that something that's feasible, or worthy of consideration, or not?
We actually did look at possibly from Route 60, tying into the bicycle path at that area. There's limited land to make the arc that you would need, and that also sparks, community character and what would be appropriate facility for that location. I think that some of the opportunity areas that are called out could generate some more creative ideas, and those would just need to be worked through and designed.
But mostly at, say, Old Elm in 41 or Wesley in 41, it would be through the management of the intersection on the ground level by way of traffic lights primarily, I would imagine.
Right, pavement markings and signage. I think primarily for this community, those seem to be the two major tools that can be implemented relatively easily and quickly.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Megan. The next item before the commission, oh, yeah, I never thought, I'm sorry. Any public commentary? Hearing none, we'll move forward.
No,
But there was, yes?
I think a lady in the back.
My name is Barbara Cornio, and I work for Active Transportation Alliance.
Would you please, yeah,
Hi, my name is Barbara Cornio. I work for Active Transportation Alliance. We're an advocacy group and a consulting firm that works on behalf of people that bike, walk, and take public transportation. So I'm just here in support of all the work that Lake Forest is doing. This is happening in all the different communities in the Northwest Municipal Conference, which Lake Forest is in part of that in the suburban Cook and Lake County. And it's very exciting to see the work here is going on. It's a great job, and I'm just here as a supporter. So thank you for the work. We look forward to seeing this plan come to be.
thank you very much. I'm glad I brought you guys with me this evening to keep me honest. Okay, now may I go to the next? The next item before the commission this evening is presentation and public hearing. Consideration of a request for approval of a special use permit to authorize a full-service restaurant and bar with light food service, both within 150 feet of a residential zoning district in 2 tenant spaces at 950 Northwestern Avenue. Are there any, did the commissioners have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest on this matter? Okay. Thinking that there might be some public testimony on this, at this time I'd like to swear in anyone, oh, thank you, Megan. I'd like to swear in anyone who might want to speak on this issue, either in support or in opposition. If you'd like to, if you would please stand and raise your hand if you have that kind of intention. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge? Yes. Thank you. Presentation by petitioner.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Schnall. I'm along with Ted Bufus. We are the owners of the Lake Forest Restaurant Group, and we are here tonight seeking a special use permit for 2 separate locations, both within the Westwood Square Shopping Center located at 950 Northwestern Avenue. Both of the locations are former restaurants, and we are simply looking to upgrade the 2 spaces with 2 new restaurants with the quality fit for Lake Forest. The first one would be the former King Ma space within that center, and we would replace that with a place called the 950 Whiskey Bar, which would be a combination of a restaurant and a bar. And the second location would be in the same shopping center just behind it, which would be the former Burger King space, and that would be the Westwood Bistro is what we would be calling them. I'm here with Ted Bufus, who currently owns and operates a very successful restaurant in Lake Bluff at the corner of Waukegan Road and 176 called Grill Number 43. Ted has been an owner and operator of restaurants for the past 15 years in family-owned businesses, and he currently operates Grill Number 43, and he is extremely successful due to his knowledge of the business and the trends, and to knowing how to create a very exciting menu. Customers keep returning because he stays fresh and consistently turns out great food in an exciting atmosphere. I'm in the commercial real estate and construction business, and I joined Ted on this venture strictly because he knows what he is doing, and I know he will be very successful in this venture. We know that there are concerns from the neighbors, but this is hardly going to be a Burger King. This is going to be a first-class place, and we have plans that are going to be coming forward for the January meeting that will be very explicit, that'll show every detail of the property. We didn't bring them tonight because we were told that was not what the intent of this meeting was. And our first of all, our plan to replace the Burger King, which is the one that is in the major contention with the neighbors, because it backs up to, the alley backs up to some neighbors' houses, is number one, we are not going to be open at 6 o'clock in the morning. Our restaurants are seeking to open at 11 a.m., not 6 a.m., which deliveries would not be coming at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning for bread deliveries. We wouldn't be getting deliveries till well after 9 a.m. Our clientele is going to be Lake Forest, Lake Bluff residents and surrounding communities that are diners and they are seeking they have high-end culinary tastes. It isn't going to be customers seeking a Whopper. The plans for the design are going to be very tasteful and in no way will offend the residents. We understand the concerns of the neighbors and we are working with the architects. That's why it's been taking quite a while because we keep going back and changing things. On lighting to screen it and all different aspects of aesthetics to the building to fit the Lake Forest codes. And also we are working with the current owners of the property to change fencing that is on the north side of the property that is in disrepair. And we have gotten quotes recently as of today to replace that fence with a brand new fence, which is going to start as soon as we can get permits to do so. Also, this location has fantastic parking, both underground parking for 60 spaces, and there's a north parking lot that off the top of my head, I think has 25 spaces. Plus, there's the Central Business District parking, which is right across the train tracks, so you just go underneath the bridge and it's right there. So we have fantastic, everything that fits for a restaurant to be successful is right in this location. And they both were former restaurants, and all we are seeking to upgrade them to a much higher standard than what was in there before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, should we read this letter before we proceed, or is it we can just read it and discuss it in the January
You
meeting?
can take a few minutes to read it right now.
Yeah, why don't we just...
I know you received...
Pardon me?
I know you received other correspondence in your packet as well.
Yeah,
so
which you
if wanna
read.
take
I
a
mean,
few
this
minutes,
is a little,
that'd be great.
this is a little lengthy. So why don't we just take a few minutes, okay? Okay. Okay. Identification of issues by staff?
Thank you, Chairman Reisenberg. I'd like to talk about 4 topics. One, I'd like to provide you with some background on the Central Business District, on the B2 zoning district, on restaurant uses. I'd like to talk about some existing conditions on the site and some past problems on the site. I'd like to talk about the present request before you, and some conversations we've had as recently as today with both the owner of the overall site and with the business owner. And then I would like to talk about next steps. So starting with background. As you know, the city's Central Business District is really an elongated district that runs primarily along Western Avenue. Our business district starts with the most intense uses in the core, right around Market Square, and buildings in that area are allowed to be the densest, allowed to cover the most ground, and are allowed to be the tallest. As you step away from that, the next ring essentially, even though it's linear, steps down businesses a little bit. And then as you step out further, there is a lower intensity of businesses. This particular site, the Westwood Square development, which is located on the southwest corner of Woodland Road and Western Avenue, is in the B2 district. It is clearly a commercial district. It is intended for retail uses, for office uses, for restaurant uses, and does allow the opportunity for residential uses within that district. As our Central Business District moves outward from Market Square, it becomes narrower, and at many places, the city's Central Business District is adjacent and does directly interface with neighboring single-family residential, or in some cases, multifamily residential. The Central Business District was intentionally designed that way to really promote interaction between residential and commercial and service businesses. And in fact, in years past, the Central Business District was even more of a mix of uses, with many residential uses in the second floor all throughout the Central Business District, including in Market Square. From the staff perspective, the proposed restaurant and bar uses are exactly the types of uses contemplated in the B2 district. They are the types of uses that residents have identified as being desired in our annual resident survey. And they are also the type of uses that various task forces that over time have focused on the Central Business District have encouraged. So the consistency of use isn't really the question. The question is really in how it's done, how the property is maintained, whether proper rules are established, and then whether proper rules are abided by and, if necessary, enforced. Moving into the second topic, talking about the existing condition of this particular site. Westwood Square has, over the years, had some evolving uses. It often, or maybe always, has had some food service uses in the development. At various times, the operation of this site has either been better or worse. It is a site that the city has received complaints often over the years from surrounding neighbors. There have been instances where maintenance hasn't been what it should have been at the site, where operations haven't followed established rules. And from the staff perspective, this is really an opportunity to work with the owner of the development, who has been the owner probably for 8 to 10 years, for a fairly short time in the history of that development. I may have my years off a little bit. And importantly, to work with the new business owners who came before you tonight. Those business owners, Mr. Bufus in particular, is an experienced restaurateur who has a successful business locally nearby, who is well known by many people in the community. They have certainly come forward stating their intent to upgrade this overall site and to really provide a high-quality restaurant and bar in this area. From that perspective, again, staff believes this is an opportunity for us to work cooperatively with the owners of the property, the owners of the businesses, with the surrounding neighbors to improve existing conditions on the site, reiterate appropriate regulations on the overall site, although this special use permit is specifically for the Westwood Bistro and 950 Whiskey Bar. Because this is an overall development, it is appropriate for the Plan Commission to consider cumulative use of this site and the impact of that cumulative use on the surrounding neighbors. It is an opportunity for repairs to be done and for there really to be a renewed awareness of rules, regulations, and the need to follow through with enforcement and commitment on the part of all parties. The third item is the present request before you. The request before you is for a special use permit. Restaurants in general are permitted outright in all of the commercial districts. This restaurant and request for the bar is before you because it is located within 150 feet of a residential zoning district. The residential district, and you do have a zoning map in your packet, is located immediately to the west of this site. Homes to the west front along Oakwood, and their backyards back up directly to the alley behind the Burger King, and the residential neighborhood is also located directly across Woodland Road, with the easternmost house being directly across from the former Burger King space, across from the trash collection area, across from the alley. So it is a site that is bordered on two sides very closely by residential properties. The special use permit is a tool that the City of Lake Forest has historically used not to deny uses, but to assure that uses are approved with appropriate conditions. And again, in this case, the use is consistent with the zoning district, and the special use permit will provide the tools to approve specific plans that I will talk about in just a minute, approve specific conditions of approval, which could involve operational aspects as well as maintenance. So to really support a use, but do so in a way that recognizes that this site does have some unique aspects because of its very close interface with surrounding residential properties. We have heard from neighbors in the immediate area who have raised many legitimate concerns, again, based on past experiences with this site. But in general, those concerns, not surprisingly, involve the adequacy and appropriate use of parking, adequacy and maintenance of screening along the perimeter of the site, which comes in the form of both fencing, landscaping, as well as screening more particular pieces of uses that might be occurring on the site. Concerns have been raised about the appropriateness of outdoor seating. An initial proposal was brought forward for this site, which actually pushed the outdoor seating more toward the perimeter of the site. The concept right now is that the outdoor seating would be located more internal to the site. As you heard from the business representatives, they are working to detail that patio plan, and in talking with them, we've had discussions about whether there could be walls, whether there could be a fireplace or other elements, plantings that help to further screen that and make that internal to the site. Hours of operation are always a big concern, again, because of this location and this impact on people's homes, on people's yards, on people's bedrooms. So it's the hours of operation of different aspects of the site, of the restaurant and of the bar itself. If there is an outdoor seating area, are there more restrictive hours for that outdoor seating area? Is there a point at which serving ends on that outdoor seating area? There currently are posted delivery hours on the building. Those delivery hours are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We do know that on occasion in the past, there have been deliveries under cover of night at 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning. That clearly is violating existing conditions, and certainly this is an opportunity to reinforce just what are appropriate delivery hours. We have provisions currently in the code that have very specific requirements about ventilation and air filtration for restaurants. And they do require high quality systems. They require the submittal of not only details of the mechanicals themselves, but also require the submittal of maintenance plans and schedules for inspections. Those are conditions that can be, and in the opinion of staff, should be included in the special use permit. Lighting is always a concern. Really looking at lighting and looking at the options for lighting that are available today with a much broader spectrum of types of lighting, many more options for fixtures that really work to shield lighting and direct them downward, or direct lighting downward, or really limit any spillover of light onto neighboring properties. Lighting throughout our community, whether it's at the Conway Park Office Park or downtown, lighting often is required to be put on timers. And although it's recognized that police and fire and businesses need security lighting, that reduced levels of lighting are appropriate and should be incorporated as some type of approvals. The code right now does not permit amplified sound of any type in our central business district. Again, the special use permit could further restrict any type of outdoor music or activities as appropriate. And the other piece that I've mentioned a couple times is enforcement. And the special use permit really does give the city the leverage not only to issue first courtesy notices to both the business and the property owner, the ability to levy fines, but ultimately the city council with a special use permit has the ability, if corrections aren't made, if situations upon notice and a proper length of time are not remedied, special use permits can actually be revoked by the city council. So a special use permit is a very powerful tool. Again, most restaurants in the central business district do not have special use permits simply because they're not located as close as the proposed restaurant is to residential development. Before I talk about next steps, I do want to mention, I forgot to mention this under existing conditions. Currently, there is a restaurant located in this development. And that restaurant started as a very small restaurant and has had success. But that restaurant has grown and is operating in some ways out of compliance with the code. The alleyway for this development on this private property is currently being used as a staging area and as a parking area for employees or for pickup agents who are under contract. That is essentially a drive-through use. Drive-through uses are not permitted by the code unless authorized by special use permit. No special use permit has been issued to authorize that use, nor has any been requested. In the history of this property and in looking at the code, that driveway, because of its location immediately adjacent to residential property, was intended and is approved and authorized only for use for deliveries to businesses. It is not authorized for the type of use that is occurring right now on a daily basis. So that is something we have already discussed with both the new business owners and with the property owners, and we believe that that is something that will be remedied soon. We can certainly explore options for how those deliveries can appropriately take place, with the real focus being toward the activity on Western Avenue and away from the neighboring properties.
Kathy, is that the pizza business?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So from the staff perspective, we acknowledge there are some issues on this property. We acknowledge the neighbors have concerns. The special use permit really is a strong tool to help us work through those. On the other hand, we also acknowledge that this is the type of business that is contemplated and consistent with the B2 district, and is the type of business that we have heard from residents that is really desired, the type of high-quality eating establishment, businesses that bring vitality into our central business district. That's what we hear from our residents that they would like to see. And finally, moving on to next steps. This matter was before the Building Review Board maybe 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, last week. Since that time, we have met on site with the business owners. We have had further phone conversations with the business owners, and we have also spoken with the property owners. We believe, as you heard tonight, that work on detailed plans to address many of these issues and to explain many aspects of the project is already underway. What we have done in an effort to really move this forward, understanding that the spaces are empty and that we're trying to balance issues, make sure the neighbors' issues get addressed, but also be respectful of the interest in moving this business forward. In the staff report tonight, we have laid out a number of items that we believe, from the staff perspective, are important for us to have before we come back to the Plan Commission, such as very clear information. There is a tremendous amount of parking available on this site, more than is available on private property for any other restaurant in the community. But understanding how that parking is allocated, whether any of it is committed to other businesses in that development, understanding the parking plan, the parking policies, understanding the circulation route plan for the site, understanding hours of operation, fully understanding any areas for outdoor seating or outdoor activity. Those are the types of additional information we believe we need. At the same time, to address materials needed by the Building Review Board, the owners are working through an overall signage plan, which will include directional signage, directing people to the underground parking that is available on site, and to some of the aesthetic changes to the building. There are no significant physical changes happening to this site. There's the parking isn't being expanded, the building footprint isn't being expanded, so it's mostly cosmetic changes that the Building Review Board will look at. We have also in the staff report begun to identify concepts, not at all tried to put in language, but concepts that we feel may be appropriate to address in conditions when this comes back to the Plan Commission for further public comment and further consideration. So tonight, you will hear a number of public comments. We certainly hope to add to our list of materials that may be needed or conditions that should be addressed, but we'd also like to hear from the Plan Commission. First, is there general support for these proposed uses if they can be done properly and with appropriate conditions? If so, then the direction to us to move forward, to continue to meet and work with neighbors and with business owners and with property owners, and then to come back to you with appropriate findings and detailed conditions for your consideration in January. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions or requests for clarification from commission to petitioner or staff? Starting with Mr. Ziccarelli.
Nothing from the petitioner at this time. Will we have an opportunity after the public speaks to?
Yeah,
to
comments, absolutely, absolutely.
Nothing at this
Yeah,
time.
sure.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Chair. I do have several questions. Where to start? With respect to, I'd like to ask the petitioners, if I may, Mr. Schnall and Mr. Bufus. Thank you. You indicated in your letter that you intend not to exceed more than 2 deliveries per day during any business day at this location. Do you really think that's reasonable, feasible, possible?
Yeah, I think that is. At my other location right now, for the most part, 2 to maximum 3, if you include a bread delivery, would be maximum deliveries a day.
So there would be a daily bread delivery?
It could be daily or every other day, depending.
Okay, so you might, or very likely would go to 3,
Right,
but you would be able to live with a maximum
yeah,
of 3 and
Yes.
after 9 a.m.?
yes.
Okay. Where do the deliveries take place?
The deliveries would take place in the back alley.
In the back alley, okay. You know, I was in that back alley yesterday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, and there's quite a bit of traffic going through there. I walked around the entire perimeter using that back alley and going north back to the Jewel, down that driveway,
Right.
back to Western. And people were polite, but they came zipping around that corner into that alley pretty good. And there was a fair amount of traffic. I was only there maybe 5-10 minutes in that alley, but 4 or 5 cars must have come down there. So it's a bit of a thoroughfare right now. Do you
Yeah,
have-
it needs to be slowed down.
Yeah.
We also, let me just, we also have a plan which we are working on with the architect to change the traffic flow in and out of the shopping center, and it would come in off of Woodland and not go out onto Woodland. Therefore, if there's later afternoon things or any cars coming in at night, they would not be shining lights into neighboring houses.
So would it be one way?
It would be a one-way and not a two-way alley.
Is that permissible, if I may ask staff?
We would want to look at the overall circulation plan and talk with police and fire and consider it in the context of the overall site. But I think the fact that that is being explored as an option, and certainly what you're seeing in the alley right now, again, has not been approved and is not authorized and cannot continue.
Okay. Just sticking with the alley on one last point, it was kind of a mess back there. There's some some insets into the building where, in at least several of them, at least one location where I saw a dumpster was tucked in there. I presume those are storage locations for dumpsters? Is that what they're all for?
Well, for the locations that we would have, we have dumpster, our own corral right outside
On
to
the
the
side.
north end of the building.
Right.
And it comes right out from a garage door that is into the space. So it would be quiet. All we do is lift up the door and go right in there, and it's private, and you don't even have to come outside or anything into the alley.
Right, so that would be the exclusive location for for garbage from your
From ours,
operations?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's stay on parking for a second here. Again, I was there yesterday afternoon. I pulled into the parking lot, and lo and behold, I could barely find a parking space for a vacant building. The lot was quite full, and while I was there, a number of cars came and went, and then I realized, kind of figured out what was happening. There was a lot of teenagers pulling in and pulling out, and they were walking right past the front door of the former Burger King and into the rest of the developed area there. I presume they were going to the pizza location. So they have discovered this as a parking lot for accessing the pizza parlor, and cruising right by the front door of your prospective establishment as their walkway. It seemed like a pretty preferred walkway path for them to get to this this other restaurant there. So how would you control or contain something like that? Would this parking lot be for the exclusive use of your patrons?
No, it is for the shopping center as a whole, but There are 60 spaces underground, which are very underutilized at the time, because a lot of people don't know that it even exists. And our goal as part of our signage package would be to show that there is parking underneath, and it's very, very convenient, especially in the wintertime, for patrons to come in. They take the elevator up and they're right at the restaurant, and and their car's warm when they get back in it.
So, on that point, Kathy, are those 23 parking spaces for the entire development?
All of the parking on this site, well, the parking on the site is private. So the city doesn't control who parks where, but a reasonable request from the Plan Commission, what we've suggested in the staff report, is that as part of this request, we receive from the property owner a detailed plan of who's authorized to use which spaces. Consistent with policies throughout the central business district, employees should be parking off-site. In this case, there is employee parking directly on the east side of the railroad tracks, and that parking is available by permit, and then later in the afternoon and into the evening, simply free for employees. It's a walk. This development has the shortest walk of any business downtown to get to that. So it would not be inappropriate as a condition of this special use permit, either completely or during certain hours, to require that all employees in this development park off-site. But the city does not control the underground parking or the surface lot. Obviously, the parking on Western Avenue is public.
I guess I'd ask petitioner, particularly if you had an outdoor dining area on a patio there, which this walkway that's trafficked by visitors to the rest of the development goes right between where the proposed patio is and your front door. Would you be able to handle that kind of pedestrian traffic that's kind of moving at cross purposes to the flow of your business?
I think it's, once the restaurant opens and the patio is in use, I think it's gonna cut down on a lot of the other flow that's going on there right now, because right now, the only thing that's going on there is that one store, and they pretty much control everything that's going on there. So I think once the use starts being directed towards all the spaces and not just one certain one, I think it will slow down a lot of the traffic there right now.
Additionally, at his current location, he does have a valet parking service for the busy hours, and if need be, after we determine, after running the business for a while, that it is required, we would do the same thing over here to allow the customer an ease to get in and out and not have to walk any distance to get into the restaurant.
Okay. Just turning to the patio again. I look at the plan and I see where the patio is proposed. When I visited the site, I noticed that the site location there slopes pretty dramatically towards Western Avenue. And I'm assuming you're not going to slope the patio like that and try and put tables on it. So there'd be a fair amount of regrading that would have to be done there.
We would have a retaining wall in our proposed plan, which is coming forward, which would build it up so it'd be flat all the way down towards Western Avenue, and it would also have above the retaining wall another wall that would go up and above the grade where the patio brick would be, and it would block it for not just noise but for other purposes, and it just contains everything within the patio.
So I'm sure at future opportunity to present, you'll have some detail about that.
It's in the works as we speak.
All right. I also noticed that there were two or three very mature pine trees in that section of land where you're proposing the patio. I guess I'd ask this of staff as well. Could they reasonably do all that construction without losing those trees, or would those trees have to be taken out?
We did meet on site recently and we raised those challenges. I think there are some opportunities to work with those trees. There's one of those in particular that is not in good condition. Others perhaps could be limbed up. And with the grade change, there could be the opportunity to have this be a bit of a sunken area enclosed by somewhat of a retaining wall with the vegetation. So I think that is the work that's underway to really explore what can happen there and how can it really be an amenity and an enhancement to both the restaurant and that area.
We did meet with a landscape architect this morning, as a matter of fact, and he thinks that we can cut the lower branches and retain all 3 of those trees. And one of the trees is in fair condition. If it were trimmed properly, that tree could definitely be saved. And our goal is to use pervious pavers so the water and everything would still get to the tree and we would not lose any of the trees for construction. And we're not going to go all the way up to the tree anyway. We would take into account the roots of the tree and try to stay within a reasonable distance.
Okay. Refresh me, if you would. What are your proposed hours of operation?
The Westwood Bistro would be from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 950 Whiskey Bar would be the same hours, 11 to 10, or actually 11 to 11, Monday through Wednesday, and actually Sunday through Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday would be till midnight.
Okay. Do you happen to know, or does staff happen to know, what the hours of operation are at, say, the grill or the lantern, or?
Yes, I do. I can tell you what their authorized hours of operation are. And the way their special use permit is written is the hours of operation of the restaurant kitchen shall be as follows. Monday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. till 10 p.m. and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The courtyard shall close at 10 p.m. every day of the week.
Excuse me, I can add something to this if you'll allow.
No, please. There'll be plenty of time for public commentary.
I'm sorry, which location was that, Kathy?
This is the grill restaurant on
The grill,
Laurel, and I am
okay.
reading from the authorized hours in their special use permit.
So they don't stay open till 11 or midnight?
No.
I'm reading from the authorized hours.
Understood. Okay. So you're proposing, if I got that right, it's for the Whiskey Bar, it's 11 to 11, Sunday through Wednesday, and then to midnight on Thursday through Saturday.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Snow, you mentioned that you're not serving Whoppers here. You are serving something that hasn't been there heretofore, and that's alcohol. As I'm sure, as a couple of letters we've received have indicated, there is community concern about introducing a bar and a restaurant that serves alcohol in such close proximity to a family neighborhood, as well as in proximity to a place which I witnessed firsthand is a quote-unquote teen hangout, or is certainly frequented by high schoolers or young adults. And I just wonder how you respond to that, or what your thought is, or how you would address those concerns.
Well, first of all, I believe the King Mouse space did have a liquor license in it when they were open. And secondly, Mr. Bufus has been a restaurateur for quite a long time, and he handles his bar in a very professional manner, and I don't see any reason why it would be any different at this location, at these two locations. And alcohol is going to be served, yeah, there's no question, but we have to deal with it as on a professional basis.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for right now, but I may have some questions later on. Thank you.
Yeah, following up on Lloyd's question, the feature of your proposal that gives me greatest pause is A, what he said about a liquor license at Westwood, the restaurant, where there's not been one there before. And in the bargain, in my view, shifting the use of King Ma to, in effect, a bar, tavern, a cabaret. because, you know, in every city I've seen those be successful, larger cities, of course. They are basically people who go there to drink. Very minor part of their business is to eat. So that gives me pause. And related to that, what market research have you done to tell you what your target audience will be?
I'll answer that.
Number one, with whiskey bar, I know the term bar is used in the name. It is going to be a more casual restaurant bar, so to speak. We are going to have a full menu. It's going to be limited compared to what the bistro menu would be, but it's still going to have a full menu, so to speak, from hamburgers to appetizers to heavier.
Will there be a kitchen in that,
There will be a kitchen.
in 950?
Yes.
Yes.
It's
No-
not gonna be bar food
It's-
either. It's gonna be higher end food that you'd find in the Westwood Bistro. However, it's just gonna be a more limited menu because the kitchen is gonna be much smaller.
But who do you expect to frequent 950 whiskey bar?
Well, the more
I mean,
the way I
a
look
younger
at it is-
crowd, all ages?
All ages. Actually, right now, the whiskey bars are popping up cross country. Mostly because the whiskey bar is more, we're producing smaller batch bourbons around the areas locally, just like craft beer. And it's very trendy right now, very trendy. I see it as a more of a casual spot to eat. I would not compare it to, I mean, it would be a little bit higher end. It wouldn't be compared to Lantern or Chiefs as far as the menus would be not similar, but it would be serving similar type foods.
So have you done any market research?
As far as the whiskey bar goes,
Yeah.
we've seen what certain places around the area, into the city and around the suburbs, are doing, and what actually was on the Channel 7 News, what is going on right now with whiskey bars, and it's something that's really, really exciting, and people are really taking a good response to it.
And it takes a very long time to produce whiskeys, and there's been a trend over the past 10 years of all these micro distilleries, just like the micro breweries, coming into play, and now their products are finally out of the barrels and they're going into bottles, and they're very nice whiskeys, and therefore these other whiskey bars and restaurants are opening up around the country because they're taking into account this past 10 years of all these micro distilleries opening up. And
Last question is, what other bars and restaurants, in addition to Grill Number 43, do you folks either own or operate?
Right now, I don't have any other
Okay.
restaurants.
Any bars?
No.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Kathy, will,
You and I have talked about this one-on-one. I think it would be for the audience. How are liquor licenses handled in Lake Forest?
Liquor licenses are approved by the city council. What would happen in this case, because a special use permit is required for both of these establishments, this full package would eventually move forward to the city council with a recommendation from the Plan Commission, a recommendation from the Building Review Board, and along with those recommendations, the request for liquor licenses for the two establishments would be considered by the city council. As part of that, the city council would look at any hours of operation that you set, and they could also set other specific hours of operation through the liquor license. Liquor licenses can also, at the discretion of the council, not the Plan Commission, can specify whether it's a beer or wine license or something more broad. The city does not have a specific number of liquor licenses. The council considers each request for liquor license on its own merits, and issues it if they feel it's appropriate and meets the city standards for quality and overall operation.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, you are the leasees.
Correct.
Where's the leaseor? Okay. Are we gonna hear from you this evening?
If you'd like, I will. I didn't swear in, I wasn't planning on saying
Mhm.
anything, but if I need to respond to
Mhm.
something, I will.
Okay. I don't know. Let's just hold off on that. There seems to be a lot of baggage here, a lot of prior baggage, and I don't want to go into commentary yet, but it doesn't sound like you're starting from ground zero. It sounds like you're starting from like -2 with the baggage. And I'll be interested to hear what the public testimony is like, and let's just go on from there.
Can I just interject something?
Pardon me?
I am in the commercial real estate ownership, management of properties, and we are working with current ownership as well to change a few things around the shopping center that will make it fit for Lake Forest and to our standards as restaurant owners in that building, which we are seeking to do a high-quality business. We're not looking to have lower-end things around the shopping center occur, like deliveries through the back that are going out, and that's the kind of stuff we're working with the ownership to have that stopped.
Sure. Again, I'm actually getting pretty far forward on my skis here, but you're going to have to remember as you speak with us and speak to the community is that I said before there's baggage. What's going to convince us and the neighbors that you're different? It seems to me that the present tenants seem to be a group that finds it easier to seek forgiveness rather than seek permission. And this is, if we move forward, things have got to change, which is why I address the leaseor. There's going to have to be a lot of assurances here that things are going to be different. Things are going to be different because what I've heard so far doesn't make me angry, but gets me close. So with that, why don't we, I'd like to take just a 3 to 5 minute break, and then we'll go right into public testimony, okay? All right, okay, thank you. Apparently I lost control. It is now time for a public testimony. Everybody's been sworn in, so if you'd like to proceed one at a time. When you get to the podium, if you could please state your name and address, please.
My name is Tom Luganville. I'm a property owner at 933 Oakwood Avenue, which is one of the buildings, one of the homes directly adjacent to Westwood Square, right behind Westwood Square along that alleyway. I have some concerns with these businesses. Matter of fact, I have three main concerns. The first concern is around traffic. As we would all expect, these two new businesses are going to bring in more employees and more customers than we saw with Burger King and with King Ma. At least I hope so. Any successful business, I think, is going to expect that. But with all due respect to the gentleman from the Lake Forest Restaurant Group, I disagree that the parking is adequate. I would argue that the parking in this site is clearly insufficient for this increased use. The parking lot that is there is smallish, has been noted already, and it's already full. There is an underground parking lot, and I encourage all of you to drive down into that underground parking lot sometime soon. You're going to find that it is almost always empty. For some reason, it doesn't draw people down in there. The signage is such that you think you're doing something wrong when you drive down inside there. So I think it's not clear that somehow a new sign is immediately going to fix that. And then third, the public parking along the other side of the tracks, I think is an unrealistic option. What we are asking is that somebody is going to park on that other side of the track and walk all the way down to Westminster and circle back to this building, or walk through the grass down a hill to the sidewalk and then around under Woodland and then cross over Western Ave and then up into this business. I would argue that is unrealistic both for employees and for customers. And the most logical course of action for anyone is to park in the residential streets. You're going to have better parking. It's way closer than anything you're going to get in those public lots along the east side of the tracks. I would do it. I do it right now over at the restaurant at the Grill on, at the Grill on 43. I already park in the residential streets over there because there's constrained parking. There's every reason to believe that people are going to want to park on these residential streets. The street parking is likely, but it is already strained because on some of these houses, already we share driveways with two houses. So for example, my house and the house next door, we can't park in the driveway. We actually compete for parking out on the street already, and now we're talking about adding a business where it's going to bring additional parking onto the residential street that is already strained. I would argue that's just not an ideal situation. The valet parking, I would argue, is not a realistic option because for a valet parking to work, you're going to have to circle back to the business. The logical way to circle back to this business is to go up Western Ave, turn right on Wisconsin, come up Oakwood Avenue, a residential street, and then turn back onto Woodland and back to this property. That's the right-hand turn, easy way of doing the valet parking. Now you've added lots of traffic onto a residential street where there are families and children, and what's even better is that's going to happen at 11 o'clock at night and midnight on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. This is just not an acceptable solution for parking at this space. So the traffic issues alone, in my view, are sufficient to reject this particular concept at this location. The second issue is the noise. There would be an increase in both the number of employees and the number of customers over what we saw at the Burger King and the King Ma. The noise from the alley is already an issue, has been talked about before, and there's every reason to believe it's going to get worse. Mr. Culbertson, I thank you for walking behind there because you saw a little bit of what we deal with day to day, but you didn't mention probably what is the most concerning thing to us, and that is the noise and the smoke from employees. What happens is these businesses along there, the employees, they can't smoke inside the building, so they go back into the back alley and they smoke. So it's the smoking break location, and that's going to get worse instead of better. And the noise along there, I can look forward to that happening every night until 11 o'clock and till midnight on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That is just not something that is reasonable for a residential area where there's families and small kids. The noise from the outdoor seating is very likely to be a problem. The building is not a sound buffer. I would encourage you guys, I would extend an invitation to all of you to come over to my house tonight, stand there and listen to the bell ringing at the Jewel. That's just my house. You could talk to any of the people on Atteridge, you can talk to the people on Oakwood Avenue, you can hear the bell ringing from the Jewel at all of these locations. That building is not a sound buffer. So when they put in outdoor seating into this spot in Westwood Square, it's going to carry right into our yards, right into our bedrooms. Come inside my house. Listen to that bell from the Jewel, and you will see what I mean. Noise is a significant issue that is going to damage the quality of our property. And we can enjoy that until 11 o'clock every night of the week and until midnight on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The noise issues alone are sufficient reason to reject this particular concept at this location. The third issue, and probably the most important one in my mind, is the unsuitability of this proposed business in its proximity to the residential area. King Moss sold beer and wine alone. It was not a whiskey bar. It was not anything close to a whiskey bar. Okay? There's plenty of alcohol at the Laurel Grill, at the Lantern, at Southgate, at Francesca's, at Chief's, at the Deer Path Inn. The community does not need another bar, especially another bar within 150 feet of residential area where there are small kids. And someone said a moment ago, all these teenagers that are coming in and out of Donati's all the time. That's where you're talking about putting 2 new bars. I would argue it's difficult to understand how that benefits the community. Restaurant, yes. Bars, no. I would argue that what we need in these locations are more family-friendly businesses. Also, the volume of food preparation is going to be an increase from the Burger King. Somebody said there's already a mess going on back there. That is unfortunately true. I'm a little sensitive to that because I know you can't, as a business owner, you can't always control, and as a landlord, you can't always control the mess that's going to go in there, but it is appropriate, as been stated earlier, it's appropriate for this commission to look at the cumulative use of this property. And what you have right now is a very busy pizza parlor already there, and you're talking about putting in 2 new businesses with a lot more seating, a lot more employees into this same location. It's reasonable to believe that's going to increase the amount of discarded food, and it's reasonable to believe it can also increase the amount of animals that it attracts, which is already an issue. And we can look forward to that every night of the week until 11 o'clock and until midnight on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. I would argue that these business concepts are fundamentally unsuitable to this location. Okay, I don't object to a restaurant. What I object to are these business concepts at this location, particularly the sale of alcohol. Frankly, no one, let me rephrase that, virtually no one in this room wants a whiskey bar immediately adjacent to their backyard. But that, gentlemen, is what you're being asked to do. You're being asked to approve a whiskey bar immediately adjacent to my backyard. There's every reason to believe.
5 minutes.
There's every reason to believe that's going to affect my property values. Someone said that it's enforceable, that we can, when necessary, revoke the special use permit. I would argue that Burger King was out of compliance. Donati has been out of compliance. Never has there been a discussion of revoking their permits. I would argue that is not a realistic solution to the problems that these businesses are likely to bring into the area. There's no reason to believe that we're going to all of a sudden start enforcing these things now because we have these different businesses than when we did in the past. So I would argue these are fundamentally flawed concepts. I would encourage you gentlemen not to drag this out for months or even years, but to vote on this and reject it immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Marlis Turek. I own and live at 196 Atteridge Road, which is a property facing the property in question. My property line is 50 feet from the property in question. And I have full view of everything that has gone on there for the last 15, 16 years, as well as everything going on up and down Western Avenue. I suggest to this commission that the proximity of our homes places a very heavy burden on this commission, and I don't believe it's a burden that you can surmount. As you are aware, the city code states that a special use permit must not be granted if it will injure the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity or will diminish the property values in the area. Allowing this restaurant complex will substantially diminish our property values and will injure me and probably everybody else in the area. If this property opens, especially if it's granted the outdoor patio, I will no longer be able to open my windows. I will no longer be able to sit on my porch. I will no longer be able to play in my yard and do whatever I do, because from the moment I'm open to that noise and that clatter and that ruckus, it will be filtering into my property. There is no fence that can protect it. There is no greenery that can protect it. It's the essence of noise that it goes up and out, and nothing can protect us. Couple things that other people mentioned, the kids, and that there already is an internal patio, by the way. I mean, they could put their patio in that internal patio, but the kids are there. The kids are right there. There's also a barber right there with kids attending the barber. There's the nail manicure lady. There's the men's furnishings. The place is filled except for these couple stores, and I suggest, as the gentleman just did, that this is not the appropriate business for this area. This isn't Southgate. This isn't Laurel Grill. This isn't Francesca's. There are no homes next door to those areas. I think Kathy mentioned the surveys and the task forces, that if people want another restaurant, they want another place to go. I don't think any one of those people live and own where I am or where these other people are. I'm sure that they would not want a whiskey bar or a restaurant complex, and particularly an outdoor patio, right next to their house. The Laurel Grill, I was hoping to add, I'll add it now. They have the right to keep their restaurant open till, I guess it's midnight. They close every night at 9 o'clock. I know this because I walk my dog every night around that time. And everybody's leaving. There isn't enough business for them to stay open. Who in Lake Forest wants to go and get a drink at midnight? Some barfly? Some college student that's already drunk from a party? Is that really what we want to need? And this restaurant appears to be a pretty close carbon copy of the Laurel Grill, which I've enjoyed. I think it's a lovely place. But they're going to be drawing customers off of Laurel Grill. And so you'll have two, perhaps, viable restaurants. I don't think so. I think they're going to dig each other's graves. This is a beautiful, quiet neighborhood, and the people in it rely on you to protect them and protect their home values and protect their children. Where this whiskey bar is going to be and the outdoor patio is actually a conduit for all the children of Lake Forest. Oakwood, Woodland, it's a conduit for all the kids going to West Park for their ball games, for their tennis, to use the little kiddie park area, to go to the annual Lake Forest Day, to go east to the beach, to run an errand for their parents at the Jewel. This is where they travel. And you want a bar and an outdoor alcohol drinking patio that's open from 11 to midnight. And the kids, you know, they're going to be there midday. So it doesn't matter if they close at 10 or 11. The very fact that they're open when the kids are there, I think, is a terrible mistake. Second floor residences, somebody mentioned, oh, there's residences above the other properties in Lake Forest. Those second floor residences were part of a plan. It was a great idea. It gives lower cost housing to people who can't afford to buy a nice house in Lake Forest. I certainly own a very valuable piece of property. I've tried to do everything I can to beautify and protect it. I am not a renter in a second floor, 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in Lake Forest. Just because somebody asks for something doesn't mean you have to grant it, and just because there's an empty space doesn't mean you have to fill it, particularly with this business. This neighborhood needs a different sort of business, something that will enhance the neighborhood. We've had several months of peace and quiet with the Burger King closed. I hope you won't destroy that. A couple more things I tried to write quickly here. Repairs and enforcement at this location should happen regardless of whether this complex goes in. This landlord has been dilatory in maintaining the property, in keeping it from being, I mean, he's the one who orders the sandblasting in the middle of the night, and that's when they show up. So fencing and repairs and lighting and keeping his workmen away from the area in the middle of the night is something he should be doing anyway. And it shouldn't matter whether this restaurant complex goes in or not. People will be crossing over the tracks to get to the parking, and I don't think you want that to be happening. Nobody's going to go down that slippery slope and come around under the viaduct. And people, as was stated, won't go into that indoor area. They're going to see lovely parking on the residential streets, and that's where they're going to put their cars. And I have noticed also that the Laurel Grill takes up all the Western Avenue parking from Woodland and Western all the way to the condos on busy nights. So there's no parking up that way at all. It's all filled, okay? Let's see if I can find anything else. Well, I guess that does it. Thank you. Please don't allow this complex. Please, in particular, don't allow this outdoor patio. It will destroy everything that we have worked so hard to create and maintain in our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Julian. I live at 190 Atteridge Road, which is directly across the street from the project. I've lived there my entire life, so I have some history in this location. I'd like you to know that I'm speaking not only on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of several neighbors who have the same concerns. This is one of the oldest residential neighborhoods in Lake Forest, with many families, lots of children. The residents hope to maintain the area's attractiveness as a residential community, while the concerns with a full-service restaurant may not be as great. The Plan Commission certainly has to question whether a bar at this location is consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Keep in mind, the concern is not how this place will look. I'm sure it would look very nice. The concern is the operation at this location. A whiskey bar might be a fine idea for some location in Lake Forest, but a placement at this location is entirely inappropriate. This isn't a matter of whether alcohol is served to accompany a meal, a fine meal. This is serving alcohol for its own sake, and that's quite a difference. Let's not delude ourselves into thinking that the mere fact that they're serving food somehow takes away from the fact that they're there to sell the alcohol. That is the business. As we already know, the proposed location shares space in the same building with Donati's Pizza, which has evolved into one of the biggest teen hangouts in Lake Forest. We ask anyone whether they think locating a bar next to a teen hangout is a good idea anywhere. Well, at this point, we're undecided as a group on the general concept of a full-service restaurant. A bar across the street is highly objectionable. Outdoor seating cannot be permitted. As the police department can attest to by virtue of the many calls they've received over the many, many years that Burger King and the other operations were in effect, noise travels easily across the street into the homes on Atteridge. Notwithstanding noise buffering efforts, it's a certainty that with outdoor seating, the houses up our street will be hearing glasses clinking, plates clattering, we'll be hearing conversation throughout the evening. It's clear the petitioner wants to make the seating area a go-to location, even as going as far as wanting to propose outdoor fireplaces. Even the petitioner recognizes the noise issue when it states in its own correspondence that it believes the Burger King building serves as a sound buffer to the neighborhood. It does not. There is no building buffering our end of Atteridge. While I don't deny the design of the outdoor seating area may be charming, the property is simply not the location for an outdoor conversation pit and serving area. If an outdoor seating area is critical to the business model of this petitioner, we urge them to look to other more appropriate locations in Lake Forest, of which I'm certain there are several. The homeowners on Atteridge, like any homeowners, deserve peace and quiet. The hours of operation. The latest meal served is dinner. As such, we see no reason why a restaurant needs to be open any later than 9 p.m., especially given the environment and the location, except Fridays and Saturdays where at 10 o'clock, I can understand. These are, by the way, the same hours as Francesca's has, which is a very high-quality restaurant. They have outdoor seating. Sounds like a very similar model. The only reason to justify longer hours is to encourage patrons to linger and drink, i.e., it's a bar, which is exactly what the residents of the neighborhood do not want. The requested hours they have are even longer than the hours of the restaurants they already own out at Grill 43. They're longer hours, and we're right next to residential property. There's nobody out there. With all the noise, traffic, and disruption that a restaurant operation generates, the hours of its operation are critical to the neighbors. As people have stated, parking. During business hours, parking must be restricted on residential streets. This was always a problem with Burger King. The petitioner's assertion that all parking needs will be addressed by valet service and underground parking is not realistic. As was illustrated for many years by the Burger King patrons who had the opportunity to park underneath, they never did. People invariably look to park at the closest street-level parking, which once the parking lot is full, will be the surrounding residential streets. If the parking lot's not sufficient to handle the restaurant's parking needs, it is possible the parking stickers or permits for surrounding residents may have to be considered. Screening is obviously a critical component of any commercial operation when it borders on residential property to address both the privacy and noise level concerns. At a minimum, we expect the fencing currently in place on western and northern property lines to be in place and maintained in good condition, and frankly, it's in horrendous condition now and doesn't do a heck of a lot for screening and or buffering the noise. I have other issues, but I'll sum it up here. I believe these are reasonable requests. I think these are requests that anyone would have if you were a neighboring property owner to these proposed operations. Keep in mind, while these establishments may represent a charming night out for some of you, they represent neighbors to us 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We know the Plan Commission works to preserve the character of the city's neighborhoods. We're confident that it'll utilize good judgment in visualizing the long-term appropriate use of the property at this location. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Nick Boyaris. My wife and I live at 947 North Oakwood, which is the property just to the west of the discussion we're having tonight. I can't be any more eloquent, I think, than what my neighbors have already stated regarding their concerns. I've provided Ms. Cernak with a list of some of the questions and issues that we personally feel are important. In addition to some of the concerns that some of my neighbors have, we have had to function as part of the maintenance department for the Burger King when their exhaust fans kind of ran amok and created some incredible din, and had to go in and ask the manager of that establishment if they would call their maintenance department. The person who serviced their exhaust fans and their air conditioning. Of course, they couldn't come out at night if that's when it happened. Typically, I'd have to say that the people who did manage the Burger King were generally very cooperative, but typically they didn't really know what was going on outside of their restaurant. They were, of course, more concerned with what was going on inside. I don't think, I personally have an objection to a full-service restaurant being in that place, but I don't think the whiskey bar and the outdoor seating are really appropriate. And those would be, in addition to the issues that I provided with Ms. Cernak, I think those would be some of the things that we'd be most concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Roberta Boyaris, and I also live, we are the closest property to this restaurant that wants to, come in here. And if you'll look at the site plan, you'll see that there are 3 houses that are adjacent to this building, to the Westwood building. And the first 2 are on fully 50-foot frontage lots, and their garages are behind the house. So they have something, they're buffered from, they're adjacent to that alley, but they have a garage between their house and the alley. Our lot is only 29 feet at the front, and it's a triangular shaped, so that our garage has to be over on the side, if you look at the site plan where you see it. So there is no garage between our house and that alley, where the deliveries are made and where the pizza guy is out there with all those cars lined up, and which has nothing to really to do with this. But my question is who, if this plan goes in with all of these restrictions, who is the enforcement on the restrictions? I have never had very much cooperation from anybody, because I was told when the Burger King was in there that there were all kinds of restrictions. They had limits on when deliveries and garbage could be picked up and when the maintenance could be done, and none of that was ever adhered to. The grease guy would come around 11 o'clock, make this terrible noise. I would be sitting in my family room less than 50 feet away, and this terrible noise of him sucking all the grease out would go on for about anywhere from 20 minutes to a half an hour. You know, the garbage guy might come at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd hear the beep, beep, beep. I mean, this is 50 feet from where my head is on my pillow. You know, so, I mean, I'm sure that if they say that they could only have 3 deliveries and that their garbage guy would come after 8 o'clock, you know, maybe this, you know, having a high-end restaurant here might not be such a bad idea. Again, I don't agree with the whiskey bar. I think that's not a good idea. But, and certainly, you know, the Burger King being an empty space in the middle of downtown Lake Forest is not a very attractive thing. I personally was hoping for maybe another bank, and I know there's a moratorium on bank, but I'm telling you, they're a great neighbor. Or maybe a furniture store or some kind of an establishment that was only open from, you know, 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, and would have people going in and out, you know, very quietly. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know what I felt.
Thank you very much.
My name is Karen Lugenbell. I live at 933 Oakwood Avenue. I just want to thank the staff for educating me a lot on how this all works and some background information, but I just wanted to go on record as agreeing with many of the concerns already voiced on traffic and noise and lighting and so forth. But if my question is, if we've already got this special use permit and there are reasons for that to exist, what is the point of coming up with a reason to, I'm blanking on the words I want, I'm sorry. What's the reason for allowing an exemption, an exception? And if we already know that there is a business or have been businesses that are not in compliance in this shopping center, this Westwood, why should I think that the future will be different in terms of enforcement? And it's lovely to come up with a lot of rules or regulations, but if we've seen a poor track record, how do we know it's going to be any different in the future? And even if every concern is addressed beautifully and laid out perfectly, and it all sounds great, I still don't want a whiskey bar in my backyard. And that's pretty much what it comes down to for me.
Thank you. Responses to public testimony from staff?
One thing I want to clarify is that what's being requested tonight is a special use permit for these new uses. Although there were various uses in the past, today we do special use permits differently than they were in the past. Donati's does not have a special use permit, does not have, nor has ever requested any approval to use that back alley. So we do currently have a code enforcement action that we're trying to work with them on that issue. But what is before the city, and the city is required to process it one way or another, is a request for a special use permit to allow the restaurant and to allow the bar. And the special use permit is required because the code requires it if these types of uses are within 150 feet of residential zoning. Does that help?
Yeah, so I said it all backwards, but I think you get what I was
Okay.
trying to say.
So I just wanted to clarify why this is before you, and that special use permits today, we do write those very differently.
So in other words, we start over.
Yes.
Okay.
Additional, Kathy?
I think all of the issues voiced are items that staff has identified and that we have tried to make both the business owners and the property owners aware of. We did start from the point that there are problems with this site today. Certainly, from the staff perspective, we have heard an interest and a commitment from the property owner and from the business owner to address those, and I think addressing those up front and making some changes perhaps is a first step in the process. I do, again, from the staff perspective, we recognize the areas of conflict, and it is a balancing, and that's why we're here at this point in the process, looking for some direction on what do we pursue, where do we work with the owner of the business and the property to detail plans more, or where do you give us different direction to not move forward with one or more aspects of the proposal?
Okay. Any rebuttal by petitioner?
The first issue I'd like to address is the parking issue and and the neighbors' concerns that people will not be using the underground parking. First of all, this is not a fast food restaurant any longer, and therefore a customer is coming into the restaurant for a 1.5 hour to 2 hour dining experience, not a 15-minute grab a burger and fries, run out the door, and you want to have your car as close as possible to the door. With proper signage and direction, people will use that underground parking facility, especially in the winter time when it's cold outside and their car's sitting outside for 2 hours. They don't want to get into a cold car, they want to get into a warm car, and the elevator to the underground parking garage is directly across the doorway from the bistro and just around the corner from the other location that faces Western Avenue. The second issue is the concern with the 950 Whiskey Bar. That is not adjacent to any residential property whatsoever. It faces Western Avenue only, and there's a big buffer of the entire courtyard and the back side of the building to the west that buffers all of the properties surrounding it, and to the east of it is the train tracks. And which brings me to the next point of the noise. Western Avenue is a fairly busy street. There's noise from traffic. The train goes by those houses every 8 minutes during rush hour, and I can't imagine that a clanking of a glass potentially is any worse than a train speeding by at 40 miles an hour with 10, 12 cars following it. A couple other issues is they were comparing us to the Grill on Laurel. We're completely different operators than the Grill on Laurel. I don't imagine that our food is going to be anywhere close to what theirs is. So, I mean, I don't want to even get into the comparison of other restaurants in the area because we're going to be a completely different restaurant, and that's why people have choices in restaurants, because they are different. And then as far as we are not relying on any parking to the north side on Western Avenue north of Woodland. We are relying on the parking lot that's part of the parking, which The owner has agreed that we are going to put up signs that it's for customer parking only, and the employees are going to be required to park in the central business district parking, which I don't feel is a major inconvenience when you're going to work for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time to have your car parked where you're not taking up customer parking in a shopping center. And if the owner agrees to do so, I don't know why that's going to be a big inconvenience. We're not asking customers to park over there. We're asking employees to park there. And I know our employees are going to park there because they're not going to take up our precious spots that are in front of our doors for the customers. And as far as having a bar, we are having food at all the hours that the bar is open. Our kitchen is open late, and a lot of people do like having a restaurant that is open to the public later than 8 o'clock at night. They like to go out for later dinners, 9 o'clock, 9:30, and finish up at 10 o'clock. We're not going to be open past that on the weekends, and basically the reason to ask for an 11 o'clock license is because people order their food up till 10 o'clock and they need to finish, and it takes a little time for that. But that's why we are requesting that for the weekends. And then as far as signage, we will have a very detailed signage plan for the next meeting, which we are working on extensively with our sign guys and our architects to make it fit the Lake Forest standards. And we are looking to be a Lake Forest restaurant. We're not looking to be a Schaumburg restaurant or a different community. We want to meet the standards of Lake Forest. And he currently meets the standards of Lake Bluff, and it's a very, very high-end, nice restaurant. And that is the type of restaurants we're looking to open here. And the 950 Whiskey Bar, it is a name, it does have the name bar in it, but we are not looking for $2 shots of whiskey and a beer. That's not our customer. Our customer is a customer that's coming in and drinking expensive alcohol. They're not ordering, 5 shots of whiskey and then leaving the bar or the restaurant. They're eating dinner and they're having a drink along with their dinner. And that's all I have to say. I hope you consider our special use, because I feel we will be a strong addition to the community. And Ted is a very good restaurateur, and another restaurant's going to look for a special use if it's not us. And I think the residents in the area, if they're going to have a restaurant come in, I would think they would want somebody who takes pride in his business and is there and running the business, and not just a manager left on site like the Burger King was, because that's not what he is. He's an on-site manager. This is what his livelihood is, and this is how he makes his living, and he's not just going to let this place go and be run by a minimum wage manager. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. I was going to go to commission discussion and comment, but let's do final questions from commission to petitioner or staff before we do that. I think in this case, why don't we start with Commissioner Ziccarelli? Okay.
Should I be sworn to address questions or make a statement real quick?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. You swallowing the, oh, right now. Go ahead.
I do.
Go ahead. Okay, go. I trust you.
I just want everybody to know my real estate company, One Corporate.
No, but now you
You need
would,
to speak in the
you would,
microphone.
yeah, come to the
I
podium.
want everybody to know
What's
that
your name and.
my name is Tony Fox. I'm a resident of Evanston, Illinois. I work in Rogers Park, Illinois, Chicago, where my real estate company won Rogers Park Corporate Neighbor of the Year last year. I sat 4 years on the City of Evanston Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm no stranger to meetings like this. I'm a licensed attorney. I'm days away from opening a movie theater as one of the anchor tenants with the University of Chicago in the Harper Court project. I have not heard any of these complaints. My history with the property, the property's been, as you know, an underperforming property. Probably 6 months after I purchased the property, Anna's Antiques disappeared in the middle of the night, and with it, 20% of my gross income on the property. Then a few years into that, we were landlocked for almost 2 years, so all of the tenants on the inner courtyard went out of business. At that point, I started to come up here on Saturday afternoons to teach jujitsu, just to see if I could breathe some life back into the center there. And when I came up, I recall there was a, and I'm not sure if it's still there was a park bench on the outside next to the Burger King where people used to eat. I used to clean up the property a lot myself while I was there, but Maybell, the woman who managed Burger King for 15 years, really took pride in her work, and it was her livelihood, and when they closed that Burger King, she lost her job. All I'm trying to do is make things better for the center and the community. I'm very interested in hearing everybody's complaints. If the pizza, once the pizza restaurant moved in and they expanded, it breathed some life back into the center. But if they're not following the rules, I will come down on them with whatever tools are at my disposal and make sure that they get on board with the program or be gone. Not a negligent landlord or one that takes criticism lightly. And so that's all that I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm glad you stepped forward. Now we'll go to final questions from commission to petitioners. Will include Mr. Fox and staff, starting with Mr. Ziccarelli.
Thank you, Jack. I have a general question and then maybe a few specific thoughts that I wanted to talk about. Right now, the petition in front of us is a package deal with 2 business entities under 1 special use permit. And just as a general question, mainly to the petitioner, but maybe a little bit towards staff as well, would it be prudent to break these into 2 separate petitions? What I've heard from public testimony seems to lead towards an objection to one of the businesses and not so much towards the other. And so I raise that as a question. Would it be more expedient and would it make good business sense, maybe not, to break this into 2 separate petitions? I just raised that, not expecting an answer, but just maybe to provoke some thought. A few specifics that I was thinking about. You know, it's interesting with listening to the neighbors speak, the perceived problems with traffic, parking, noise, light. Not unusual questions for neighbors to have, concerns for neighbors to have. I think we have to listen to those questions. So I hear the neighbors have concerns, deep concerns. That's where they live, that's where their investment is, that's where they are, it's where they're raising their family. At the same time, I hear the petitioner say, no, it's going to be fine. So I say to myself, how do we measure if it's going to be fine? And a few thoughts and ideas, and maybe should you continue with the petition, some quantitative documents, discussion, so that we can talk about in quantitative terms, parking, light, noise. For example, in the question of light, a photometric plan could be developed for what's there and what's proposed, measured in foot candles, average foot candles at the property line. This is not an unusual request to make from an engineering standard. And so I might suggest that should you continue with the petition, maybe something quantitative so that we don't say, I'm concerned about this, and the petitioner say, it's going to be okay. Show us how it's going to be okay. Same with maybe parking and traffic. You know, I know from what I read, occupancy of the restaurant is 120 plus 26 outside, 146. The whiskey bar, 65 plus 12 outside, if I read right, is 70.
The outside is no longer,
Okay.
we're getting rid of that.
So, thank you for correcting that. So we're over 200, 211 total. What is the occupancy of the old Burger King and the old restaurant? I would be interested in that comparison, because how do we measure if the two places get maxed out, the comparison of what parking could be, the requirement versus what parking is there now? So I would suggest that those calculations be made and be presented to give us a better idea of what we're now planning to do versus what was there, if that makes sense. You know, a third item that I think is really important is, and this will probably work itself inside out from the restaurant. The old Burger King was at least 25 years old. And as you apply for a building permit to build out the inside, new mechanical standards are in place. Besides what Kathy talked about for restaurants, just indoor air quality. My guess is that the mechanical equipment's going to be changed, probably upsized. So that leads me to a couple things. One is, it's coming from the inside, but affects the outside. So if the mechanical equipment gets changed, you know, two things come to mind. One is screening, of course, but the other is noise. And the noise from a compressor going off at midnight to cool a building, for example, in the middle of summer when the neighbors have their windows open. So here again, noise can be quantified. If there is a design taking place currently by the architect to increase the size of the mechanical units, what would be helpful to have presented would be a quantitative study of the acoustics of that new equipment.
First of all, the equipment on the roof currently is very large. It's probably large enough to meet our needs. And the newer equipment today is extremely quiet. I happen to own quite a few properties myself, and we have a lot of rooftop units. And the new units that we've put up, they're extremely quiet compared to units that were put up 25 years ago.
Well, with respect to your comment, you're saying that. Prove it to me.
Well,
we
could show you the
acoustical
different-
studies.
Yeah, okay.
Show me what the old equipment is. Show me what the new equipment is. I think we have to listen to the neighbors. We have to respond to their concerns, but not you saying it's going to be okay and they're still concerned about it. I think we need to prove that.
Well, we are presenting a full plan. That is as part of, to meet before the planning commission to get approved. We have to present the plan in full and show them everything that we want to do. So I mean, it's not like we're getting a rubber stamp to get through. We need to go a couple more steps still.
That's where I'm going with it, is, you know, an acoustical study, which typically is not part of that, is what I'm recommending, be added to the construction documents and the plans. So I'm asking you, you know, I really don't have an opinion right now, but I'm saying convince me or convince us one way or the other and do it quantitatively, I think would be where I'm going with it. And I think there are certain tools you have available to do that.
Commissioner Lake?
Yes, I would just recommend to you that as you go forward with the plan department, you address the noise question, and if that means eliminating those outdoor drinking areas, do it. And the parking, the numbers just don't compute in my head in terms of the numbers that Augie was mentioning, in terms of numbers of spaces inside the two businesses. You know, if I was calculating as he talked, you're considerably over the number of tables or people sitting at the tables is far, far more than the 90 plus 23 parking spaces you say you have.
But that's assuming full capacity all the time, though,
I understand, but I assume that you're going to be doing everything you can to make that as full capacity as you can.
Yeah, and people do come in cars together, too.
I understand.
It's not just that every single person has their own car.
Understand. So that's just my suggestion.
I thought we were just doing questions, as you said, but it sounds like we're doing questions and comments, so
Okay.
doing questions and comments, and then if somebody wants to come back and ask some final things, I'll entertain that too, but,
Great,
okay.
thank you.
Sure.
I do have just a few mop-up questions. Carry-out contemplated or not?
Yes, there will be carryout.
There will. And how will that work? Through the front door, through a drive-through,
Through the front door.
Through the front door? Okay, so there will be some grab-and-go traffic.
Yeah, but that's a very small percentage
percentage
of. of
It's all
the business.
incremental. Is there a fireplace on the patio or not?
We're proposing one, yes.
You are proposing one, okay. Kathy, one of the members of the public used, I think she quoted the ordinance. The operative words I heard were, "shall not injure or diminish." Could we get a copy of that, the ordinance, as it specifically relates to the 150 and feet?
Yes, those criteria will be included in the staff report.
Okay. I'd very much like to refresh my knowledge of that. We did discuss deliveries earlier, 2, maybe 3, no more. But again, one of the spokesmen from the public mentioned maintenance, trash collection. What hours would they take place? I understand historically it may not have happened between the hours of 9 and 5, for instance.
They won't be, they will be during business hours, and it would be, like they said on the building, between 7 and 6, what deliveries can come through. It will not happen any earlier. That's guaranteed.
7 and what?
7
Between
a.m.
7
to
a.m. and
6
6
p.m. for hours of delivery, and that would go the same for
I
trash.
thought
collect-
you mentioned earlier that they'd all be after 9 a.m.
Well,
would be,
but that's what the building
Ah,
standard is
okay.
current.
All right.
We don't, nobody gets there till 9 o'clock at the restaurant, so it wouldn't, none of the deliveries would happen until after 9 a.m.
Okay. A lot of this raises the question of enforcement. I just guess I'd ask staff to maybe generally address, how do we enforce these things? They say them, but how are they enforced?
It really depends on how the special use permit is written. The special use permit is an additional tool, and as I said a few minutes ago, special use permits today are written very differently than they were written 5 years ago, and certainly very, very differently from how they were written 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. The special use permit, normally the approach that is taken is we do a courtesy notice. Often it's in the form of a verbal conversation out on site. We follow that up with a written notice to both business owners and property owners, and then the special use permit says they're written today, then do trigger an official notice, and that official notice requires a cure or that the offending action be remedied within X number of days. And depending on how that special use permit gets written, it's 30 days or 60 days. And then after that time period, the Plan Commission can make a recommendation to the City Council, or the City Council could take action itself to revoke or modify a special use permit.
So the ongoing violation after these warnings would come to the attention of the Plan Commission?
If it's a violation of the conditions of the special use permit,
So
yes.
staff would bring that to the attention of the Plan Commission?
Yes.
I see. Has that effectively happened in the past?
We have had some issues with special use permits. To be honest, most of the time they do get addressed.
There's
But I
compliance.
think what we're dealing with here is special use permit that may not have, or previous approvals that weren't done through special use permits, or restrictions that don't have the language that we have in it today, that really talks about proper notice, a proper cure period, and then details the ability for a revocation of a special use permit.
Okay.
That is fairly new language.
Thank you, Kathy. Mr. Chairman, my comments would be simple, I hope. The first thing I think the commission has to consider is, once we've reviewed the actual language of the ordinance, should this kind of special use be permitted under the ordinance, or is it acceptable under the ordinance, given the language of the ordinance? I did hear the words injure or diminish the quality of life or the property values of the surrounding residents. That seems to me to be a very, very high bar because it specifically designates within 150 feet. And I think once we can answer that question, if we can answer that question in the petitioner's favor, I'm not saying we would, but if we could, then I think the burden of proof would pass substantially to the petitioner to address a rather lengthy list of concerns that I think the neighborhood and the commission members would like to see addressed. They've been enumerated. I'm not going to try and summarize all of them here. I think Kathy will have a pretty concise list of what those issues are, but they obviously pertain to noise, lighting, circulation or traffic, parking, all the other issues that were brought up earlier this evening. And I would urge the petitioner to come back, as Augie has suggested, with something a little bit meatier than your personal assurance. I think you need to have a pretty comprehensive plan to present to us, backed up by some quantitative analysis that gives us some real assurance.
Well, which we do, but it's in the process.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. But I think in view of what we've heard here this evening, I'm just going to reinforce that, if you will. I don't mean to suggest you weren't going to do that, but I think it's pretty evident to us that you're going to have to come back with a pretty convincing case, and we'll take it from there. Is that a fair commentary, gentlemen?
Sure.
Okay.
Kathy, I have a few things before comments. Just to make sure that I understand, the special use permit will be for the entire property, including the Donatis?
The special use permit request that is before the commission is a single special use request that includes the Westwood Bistro and the 950 Whiskey Bar. That is the request before the commission. However, because this is an overall site, it would not be unreasonable to specify some of the overall operating rules of the development complex in that special use permit. But this would not retroactively.
It could be included. It could be included as part of the conditions. That's what you're saying, yes?
The specific issues on the site, yes.
Sure. Okay.
If Donatis wants to do something such as have a drive-through type facility, they would need to come to you on their own and request approval. Currently, there is no approval for that, and it's operating in violation of the code because there has been no approval, no special use permit granted for that piece of their use.
Okay, all right. Gentlemen, what's your timeline?
Well, obviously, we want to be open as quickly as possible.
What's that mean?
Well, we'd like to start construction January and open in April.
That's unlikely. I just mentioned that because we won't be meeting again until the end of, perhaps the end of January. So I doubt that you would start construction before there would be any approval. I feel like I'm drinking through a fire hose on this thing, and I'm trying to get my arms around this. I'll just muse for a while, sometimes I do. I came into this thinking that this was a really good idea. A nice restaurant. I think Lake Forest, from my own individual standpoint and from a planning standpoint, it seemed to make a whole lot of sense to me. I've heard a lot of stuff today that's deeply disturbing to me that needs to be, would need to be addressed, I think, before I or anybody else up here would move forward with this. I'm thinking that it's still possible, but I'm also thinking that it requires a lot of work from you and actually from Mr. Fox. As I said, you didn't start from 0 here. It looks like you're starting from, I said before, -2, maybe -5. There's a lot of baggage here that needs to be addressed. It needs to be a cumulative proposal that you come back with that deals with remediation of existing issues. And then also, moving forward, addresses the issues and the concerns of some of the people, Parking, well, I think everybody talked about it, parking, noise, lighting, screening, et cetera. Hours of operation, have you reached too far? Did you ask for the moon hoping to get a star? I don't know, but I'm just thinking, take a look at all of the issues. Don't be bashful about coming back with something that's less than comprehensive in terms of your approach, because I think there's a tough road ahead. I haven't heard anybody up here say no, and I certainly have, but I haven't heard anybody up here say yes either. So you've got a big job ahead of you, and I would encourage you, all of you, to work with Kathy to resolve these issues.
I believe we are working with her pretty well, and we do have the task at hand. We understand it, and we are working with our architects, our landscape architect, to address all of these issues, as well as with ownership. And we already have started the wheels in process in getting some of these items fixed, and a lot of it has to deal with an existing tenant, but with rule changes in the shopping center, I think that can be remedied pretty quickly.
Okay. I'm sensing that Commissioner Culbertson wants to say something.
No.
I just got incredible.
No, said my piece.
Okay, fine. Gentlemen, go off and do your job. Come back to us in January, and let's. Something. I saw you before talking with the neighbors. That's not a bad idea.
Well, we're not out to make enemies. We want customers.
Well, it would be nice if you could make some friends there too.
We're trying.
And do some convincing.
We're trying.
Because if successful, you will be neighbors together. And it would be very helpful. Very helpful to do that.
Well, we don't want neighbors that are going to be calling the police and everything constantly. We want to be friends with them. We want to have them as our customers and have them come in. And we're not looking to be adversarial with anybody in the neighborhood.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Didn't even have my microphone on. That will conclude this issue. We'll see you folks again in January, I guess, huh? Hopefully it'll be a more compatible and whatever. All right. Thank you.
Chairman Reisenberg, just for everyone's
Sure.
benefit, you will receive, everyone here, I believe, received mailed notice. If you didn't, please sign in sheet in the back, and I will make sure you get added to the list. But you will receive another notice.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is public testimony on non-agenda items. I'm thinking that is none. Do you have anything to Kathy? No? Okay, then we will, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Favor? Okay, thank you.